All right, everyone. Tonight is our session on sentiment analysis and in-memory computing. So you'll be working with DB2 and RStudio in cloud environment. All right. So here is tonight's agenda. We're going to be talking about the sentiment analysis tutorial walkthrough, including some do's and don'ts, some common errors the students made over the semesters. We're going to talk about the data load validation. I'm going to do a big SQL refresher for you, a little bit about RStudio environment and some troubleshooting, all right? But before we do that, I need to remind you that you need to please do not call IBM, submit all your tickets to Salesforce, all right? And please, 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 please make sure that you provide your name and contact information in the ticket. Otherwise, we cannot tell who submitted the ticket. Seriously, it happened a couple days ago when the student who submitted the ticket did not provide the name, did not provide any screenshot, any issue description, just saying that they cannot log in, right? But how would they reproduce the problem, see? So please, assistance with DB2, assistant with RStudio or Cloud Pack, any technical issues, you're gonna submit the Salesforce ticket. Right? And if you have any general questions about the due date, some general concept, that goes to instructor, and that goes to the in a classroom, right? Classroom discussion, and anything confidential like your grade goes to instructor, right? So now here additional tips. Please do not submit any tickets to IBM. They don't know what your assignment is. Please do not cancel your IBM Cloud account and do not enter credit card number. This damage cannot be undone because once you enter the credit card number, your account is no longer academic, all right? And this cannot be undone. You get only one code, one feature code per academic year, per year, right? So, well, please be careful with that. Please do not update the R version in integrated RStudio environment, right? Whatever version is there, it is there. So just keep in mind. All right. Okay. Another thing is this. Please do not open the application that applies to R. Do not open R in multiple tabs because what happened is, remember, R runs, it's an environment, right? You run in RStudio environment. So an environment does what? Consumes the capacity hours. You have 10 capacity hours per month, right? RStudio consumes 1 capacity hour per clock hour. So please, please, if you open it in 2 tabs, then it means that you're going to be consuming the capacity hours twice, all right? So please don't do that. And please, once, if the code runs, please avoid stopping because that creates another process and you know what happens. Please avoid copying your SQL code and your R code into Microsoft Word because, well, it's a rich text editor format and introduces some characters that are not recognized in SQL. When you run the code will be corrupted. Some examples include the Microsoft Word code, all right? So please, it's very difficult to fix and you may end up redoing the code. Avoid using browser back button, all right? You might lose the work. You use navigation menu instead. And please, when you exit R, how do you exit R? You run the Q command and then you go back to the environment and make sure that RStudio environment is stopped. If you do it by clicking the X on a tab, nope, you're not stopping the environment. See what I'm saying? And please, if you run into an error, avoid spending days on it, ask for help, right? Oh, very important. Download the CSV file from course content, but please don't open it. If you open it for a fraction of a second, you may ruin the date format. The date format was fixed. The CSV file was edited in TextPad to fix the date formatting. So please do not open that CSV file in Excel because it will corrupt the date format. All right? So please, before you upload, don't do that. Now, let's look at the big picture of what you're gonna do. You're gonna read the dataset description and you're gonna define the specific business problem. What are you trying to solve? Like for example, in the airline example, you were looking at the feedback about airlines. You were looking at the reasons for negative feedback. What is that exactly, right? That drives those comments. What exactly? What positive comments are there? What drives us, etc. Which keywords appear in positive reviews, which keywords appear in negative review, right? Things like that. You define the problem. Then you're going to load the CSV file to the DB2 on cloud database. You load it in a table. You're going to check the load log. If there are any errors, any warnings, should not be. And you're going to save the screenshot of the load status, all right? When you load the data, you're going to save the screenshot, and I'll show you where to find the history if you have not saved it at the time when you loaded the data. Then you're going to check the table metadata, such as number of fields and their data types, right? And you want to make sure that the number of columns match, right? So no extra columns were created, etc. You're going to use SQL to analyze the data. You're going to write queries that are meaningful, right? Then you're going to load data into the project. Remember, last assignment you created the project in a data platform, right? In the cloud pack, you created a project. You may reuse the same project if you like, right? But you're gonna load the data and then you're gonna read the data into RStudio. You're gonna launch the RStudio from that project, right? And you're gonna analyze data in R. You're going to interpret your findings and reflect, right? What are the disadvantages of that experiment? If you were going to do further study in the future, what would you do, etc., right? Things like that. So what you're gonna do, you're gonna use the DB2 on cloud. You have up to 200 megabyte of data storage and it's free. And you don't need to worry about capacity hours for DB2 part of the assignment. So you're gonna use built-in analysis, and it's a DB2 enables advanced processing. So it does not require loading the entire data set in memory. It's not processing on disk, but it loads only part of the data that fits that matches the query based on the query criteria. All right, that improves the speed, and basically that's also called prefetching data, right? So no decompression is required, right? So basically, the chunks of data are skipped that are not relevant to the query criteria, right? When you write SQL, SQL code has a criteria, right? Data selection criteria. The part of the data that do not match the criteria, they are skipped. You're not reading the entire data, in other words, right? It's in memory processing. That's what DB2 you'll use for. And what you can do in R, you can do some trend analysis, you can do the term association, you can do decision tree, you can do k-means clustering, hierarchical clustering, network of terms, etc. Right? So you are given the code for this tutorial, and the code has examples of several methods. For your assignment 3, you do not need to run all methods. Please don't. Just do the visualizations and then pick 2 or 3, no more than 3 methods from the list. And please go more in depth. Focus on analysis, right? So that's quality over quantity, as I say, right? You don't want to just run the code and present the result. You want to interpret what the result tells you about the data, right? So in general, it's possible to connect other applications to DB2. We're not going to be doing that, but just know that it's possible. So please remember this. If you do delete the service, That's it, it's gone. Then it means that the data that you uploaded will also be gone and you will have to redo it. But once in a while, things happen, right? The DB2 is a distributed database. Once in a while, the node goes down. And you cannot wait for it to be back up. You have to get the work done, right? In that case, I might be asking you, I might be suggesting you to create another service, and by chance, you're going to be placed on a different server node. By chance, it will work. There are different nodes. Sometimes nodes go down. So please save your SQL code, SQL code on your PC, okay? That way, if the node goes down, you create another instance of the service, right? You reload the data and you can reproduce the work just by rerunning the code, all right? And I'll show you. But basically, first of all, when you add the service, right? When you add the service, you need to do what you need to do. So service credentials. Why do you need to do the service credentials? Because that's how database is, right? So when you edit that service, right, that service is going to appear in resource list. I have multiple resources. I know that because I've been doing this course for a long time. This is the one I'll be using, the instance I'll be using. See, it's going to appear in your resource list. And what I'm talking about credentials, when you create the service, first, see that service credentials. This is your username, right? Because if you don't create that, well, basically, what's username? It's a schema, right? It's a collection of all your, it's a place, location where all your database object is stored. You must create that username, so that's a service credentials. If you don't see this option, then maybe you have Cloud Pak open instead of IBM Cloud. Remember the differences between Cloud Pak and IBM Cloud? If you need to do things like managing the service, such as adding credentials, you want to launch that service from IBM Cloud. So that's a credentials piece, right? Then, uh, so so remember that you've got service credentials that you need to add, right? Well, then you're gonna load the airline sentiment data, but for today, I'm gonna give you a different example. I'm gonna give you the hotel data, and I'm gonna give you the data sample. I'm gonna give you the file, and I'm gonna give you the SQL code that I'll go over today, all right? So here, this is the hotel data. So we have the hotel address, the hotel category, the country, city, latitude, longitude, name, the postal code, province, and the reviews, right? Review text, review title, and then the user who wrote the review, and etc. Right? Now, so that's the data. I loaded the data. This is a DB2, right? So I loaded the data. How did I load the data? I went to data. See this? I went to data, oops, and then I chose the file, right? Then I specified the target table. I defined the table name. Important thing is that you'll need to edit the column settings. What happens when you load the data? The DB2 will try to determine the column data types and column widths. However, it's doing it by looking at the data sample. And I did a lot of troubleshooting, so I'm giving you this. You will need to change the column length, all right? Then it should work. It should not throw errors. I did a lot of troubleshooting on my end to make this work. So those are the changes. If you look at the tutorial, right, you need to, when you upload the data, you need to change the column length, right? If you don't do that, some columns will not be read correctly. It's going to throw warnings, and after a certain number of warnings, the data load will fail. All right? So please make sure that you follow this step. You have a similar step for the airline sentiment data. But here today, we're going to be looking at the hotel's review data, right? So suppose that you loaded your data and you forgot to take a screenshot, right? You forgot to take a load screenshot. Not a big deal right now because you go to the load history, watch, right? I clicked on data, and then I went to the load history tab. From here, see here, this is the history of my loads, right? This is a log. If I didn't delete the log entry, it's still here. So see here, this is a file that I loaded, and here it shows my schema, right? My username in uppercase, and this is a table name of the table. Number of rows, loaded, number of rows rejected. So let's look at the hotel entry. I double click. So see here, and very important, when you take the screenshot, you want to make sure that you show the time when the load started and the time when the load ended, right? So that's the screenshot supposed to show the data that you used as a source, which is hotelreviews.csv file in this case, right? In your case, it's gonna be the airline sentiment, and for assignment 3, it's gonna be the candidate, the debate, right? So here, target, this is a table, but the first piece here, this is a schema. So that's basically your username. And that's a table in your schema, right? It's going to be in yours. Right now, it's in mine. So number of rows, red, number of rows loaded, number of rows rejected. That should be 0. All right, so if there are any errors, they will appear here, errors and warnings. And you can view table here, right? You can do that. So that shows table structure, the columns and their column data types. You can do that, right? But once in a while, you know, we can't rely on this interface, right? So what you could also do is, and I'll show you, you can view the table metadata programmatically. What's a table metadata? Metadata is a data about data, right? So when you look at the table structures, the column names, their data types, so that's a metadata, right? The time when the table was created, last modified, huh? That's what we're talking about. So this is the history. Load history is saved, all right? Now, next thing is, we looked at the load history. Now we're going to talk about the programmatic approach to validate the load. And what I did here, I saved the script, and I'll give you a copy of that script. I go to the runs SQL, and you're going to start with a new file called untitled, right? You're going to start with a new file. What do you see in here? Here you see the stub called data object. So see this, if you expand this is your schema, right? And here are the tables that I have. In my case, I have 2 tables, right? And I did not create any views. We don't use views in this course, but my schema and my tables, right? So that's what I see here. Here, this window is where you're going to write the SQL code. I would recommend saving it in both places. You can save it here, right? I save it as hotels.sql. Then when you log in next time, you click here, saved objects, and the file that you saved will appear here, and you just open it for editing. You open it here, all right? Then what else do you have? This is just editor, undo, redo. You can format the statement. You can change the font, etc. You can delete the selected row, right? You can turn the SQL syntax on. That might help, right? And for the queries, you can run the whole script at once, or you can run one query at a time. I'm gonna go with run selected because I want to show you pieces, right? And here, this is a history. So let me clear the history. For right now, I'm just clearing the history. I want to start clean. So now, what is this? This query returns a number of rows. See this count star? What does it do? It does a count, right? Each query has a select clause, and must have a from clause. Select specifies what you want to select, and a from is a table from which you select in the data, right? So here, count is a number of rows, and this is a column alias, because I don't want to display my result as count star. I want it to be more user-friendly. I want to show user-friendly column header, right? So let's do that. Let's run this query for some unknown reason. Okay, I pull the cursor. Let's see what happens. Run selected. Okay, well, what did it do here? Oh, for some reason, I'm unable to run the next one. Let's select the first one. See this? I selected the first one now. And what is this dash dash? This is a comment. What do the comments do? They tell us what the code does. So I like to document my code so that later when I look at it, I'm going to know what it is, right? So here, that's a query that I just ran. And what does it give me? The result, I'm looking at the result, and it gives me the number of rows in the table. I can look at the details. That tells me how long did it take to run, right? And etc. This is just the full queries that I ran, and the history is here. I can go back to the past queries. What am I doing here? There is a table called system tables, systables. And that table stores information about tables, all right? But when you query it, you don't want to see tables that were created by the system. You only want to see, suppose that you only want to see your tables. There are two ways to do it. Well, first of all, what is this? System is a system schema, all right? So you have to say this, select, and here you're going to list the columns, and those are the columns in the table, in that table. Table name, who created the table, the time when the table was created, and the number of columns. That's what it returns. But here, in the where clause of the query, you specify this. There are two ways. Here, creator equal, and here you must put your schema name in the uppercase. So if you were going to take my script and run this query, how do you know your schema name? You're going to go to data object. This is your schema name, all right? This will be your schema name. You will replace it. However, there is a better way to do it. The better way to do it is this. Creator equals system underscore user. System underscore user will pull the username of the person who is running the code, who is running the session user rather. So who is the user that's currently running the code, right? I logged in as my schema, so that's gonna pick up my schema name. And if you take that same query without modification, it's gonna pick up your schema name. This is a more efficient way to do it, but you can do it either way, all right? So what's gonna happen when I run this? Oh, also please remember that the table metadata is stored in the uppercase. So what does that mean? So I look at this, the table name is stored in the uppercase in the metadata table, right? So if I was going to query something like where name equals airline underscore sentiment, in the quotes, I would have to put airline underscore sentiment in the uppercase. Table metadata stored in the uppercase. However, when I select from the table in a regular query, it does not have to be in the uppercase. Only when you query this metadata table that stores information on table. There is another table that you need to know. It's called the syscolumn, system columns. What does it store? It stores the information about the table columns, right? Metadata about the table columns. And here I decided to just use system underscore user because if you create this table, right, hotels reviews, just to follow along this demo, and if you run this query, you would not need to edit it, see? So system underscore user will pick up the username, the schema name, right? The schema who is running the code. So here I'm gonna run this. I'm going to run this query. Let's see what's happening now. And remember this, see here, you have select clause, you have a from clause, and you have a where clause, and where clause can have two conditions. See? So that means that the table creator has to be person who running this code, and the table name. So I want to see only the columns for hotel reviews table, right? And remember, table names are stored in the uppercase. So you have to put it in the uppercase, right? Here, this is the output. The actual table has more information, but we don't need to worry about it for this course since this is not the database administration, right? But still, you need to be able to verify that the data was loaded as expected, right? I already mentioned briefly that queries can have multiple conditions. We're going to look in more details. But another thing before I do that, I need to point out what happens if the data load is unsuccessful. How do you reload? All right, so you're going to go to, you need to go to the data again. You're going to go back to data. You're going to go to tables, right? You're going to go to tables. And if I was going to reload my airline sentiment, something went wrong. Perhaps I did not specify the correct column data types or something. This is what you would do. You would go here, right? Like schemas. It will look like this, schemas. You click on your schema and you're going to see two tables. You're going to see the table in the schema. In my case, there are two tables. But if I was going to reload the airline sentiment, this is what you could do. You click, well, this shows the details, right? But I can do this. I can select my table and I click here. Select the table, and I clicked here and I would select drop. All right, I'm not going to do it, but if you have to redo it, you would select the table and you would drop it. Not delete, but drop. Remember, delete does what? Delete the rows. Drop removes the data in the table structure. All right? So this is how you would do it. Now, let's go back to the SQL window. You might have queries with two conditions, right? It's where clause with two conditions. Like, for example, I can do the pattern matching. I can do something like this. I want to look at the neutral. I want to look at the post with a neutral sentiment. I want to look at the neutral reviews, and I want to make sure that the reviewer contains the string traveler, right? So the reviewing username, the user who is given the review, contains the word traveler in the name. How do we do that? Well, another piece here is that we want our comparison to be not case sensitive, right? So you probably want to convert this column to the uppercase in the query. You want to do comparison in the uppercase, and I specify it in the uppercase here also. But this is a pattern matching. What does that mean here? This % means any number of any characters. So contains traveler. It means that any number of any characters follow traveler, and any number of any characters precedes the traveler, and the semicolon, right? So see here, I'm selecting these columns from table. I specify the table name, and in the where clause I have two conditions, right? Both conditions must be true for the rows to be selected. So I ran selected, and let's see what's gonna happen. You want to look at the details. Sometimes you want to click on this arrow to open this in a bigger window. So now what? You look at this is the category, name, review text. Those are the columns that you selected. Then you're going to look at reviewer name. If you see reviewer names that does not contain the word traveler, it means you need to go back to the drawing board, right? You need to rework your query. And note here, traveler, here initial letter is capital. It could be different spelling, right? So like, for example, here, everything is in lowercase. It should select. So that's a reason we converted both sides, we specified both sides in the uppercase, right? And see the results are 5 pages long. See that here, just the traveler, any number of any characters, any means could be 0. It could be just traveler. All right, I'll keep going, etc. All right, see this? The capitalization should not matter. That's why I converted both sides to the uppercase. It could be all capital, it could be initial letter capitalized, right? So now let's go to the slides, make sure that I do cover a lot of things. So, all right, that was the drop table, right? There's another option to truncate. So just want to emphasize this. To delete deletes the data. It does not delete the table structure, does not remove the table structure. Drop removes the table structure and the data. Truncate, it keeps the table structure, but it removes the data and also it reclaims the memory that the data was taken, right? That's a big difference, right? And here is just how you would do it programmatically. If I was going to write the code to drop my hotel review table, I would write it like this: drop table, and then specify the table name and semicolon, right? So this is just how to see the history. I showed you that piece. Now let's review the clauses of the work of the select statement before we move on. So select is a comma delimited list of columns that you want to see in the output. The column can also be the calculated column, right? It could be aggregation. Like for example, you can count the number of people who gave the positive review, things like that, right? It can be anything. You could do this operations with the strings, etc. From is a table from which you select the data. Where clause specifies the conditions for filtering rows, right? It just single rows. And also, if you had more than one table, you can specify the join condition in the where. Group by is a list of columns for which that are used for grouping data, or in other words, the columns for which the data is summarized. For example, if I wanted to show the number of positive, negative reviews by hotel, so probably I want to summarize my data by hotel name, right? And suppose that I want to do average rating for hotel, all right, average rating of the hotel, then I would do what? I'm summarizing my data, I'm grouping by the hotel name, perhaps, right? Just an example. And what does the having does? Suppose that I want to list I want to list the hotels that have above average rating. How would I do it? Here, I would use the having clause, because having clause is going to select the groups that meet the specified condition. In other words, the group here is going to be the hotel, right? And you're going to select only the hotels that have a rating above the average, right? Something like that. So having specifies the group condition, and where clause is individual row. Order by, it's a comma delimited list that you use to sort the data, the output. Select statement must have select and from. You cannot have a valid select statement if you don't specify what you select and where you select it from. Make sure that the table name spelling and column name spelling match as they are in the database. Because if I miss the underscore perhaps in the column name, my query is going to be throwing an error, right? Because it does not recognize the column with that name, right? So we need to check the spelling. It's one of the common errors that students make. the spelling errors, right? So this is just an example of the query we just looked at. You have two conditions, and I explained why we convert to uppercase, right? Because we want the comparison to be case insensitive, right? So now, next thing is, this one is just want to list your review ratings. And here, well, let's do this. Select distinct. You're gonna list the distinct values, right? Let's do that. Let's run this, run selected. Let's see what happens. I'm listing the distinct values of the ratings. So let's look at the output. Here I've got negative, neutral. I've got positive, slightly negative, slightly positive, and what is this? What is this? What do you think is this? Those are the missing values. So that means that I have some data where the review rating is unknown, if you will, right? Review rating is not specified. To see that I need to know which values I have, because if I want to, perhaps if I want to select the subset of data where reviews are negative, right? This is going to be the string comparison. It's a case sensitive. So it matters how I spelled negative. If it's a lowercase for, if it's a initial capital, if it's all capital, if it's all lowercase, it matters, right? So I want to know which values do I have. And as you see, some values are missing, and we're going to talk about handling those missing values in a query. So now I want to see how many records I have per each rating. So let's run this query here, and let's see how many records do we have for each rating. Let's see, and go here, and why do you think it's showing me 0? It's because count ignores missing values. If I specify it like this, if I put the column name in here, it's gonna ignore the missing values. So I'm not quite getting the results that I want, right? I want to list, if the value is missing, I want to know how many reviews are missing the rating, how many were, right? We want to know it. Missing values in the database are represented as null. So let's, for right now, let's do this. Let's find out what are we missing here. So let's see how many reviews are missing the rating. Let's just run this, run selected. Okay, let's see what happens. Take a look at it. I have 80 rows. See this? Where review rating is null. I have 80 rows in my data where review rating is not specified, right? But when I look at the result of this query, I see 0. Why? Because the problem is here. This here, when you do an count, it ignores the missing values, all right? So you have multiple ways to do that. So here, first of all, when I display it, to make it user-friendly, I'm gonna use the NVL function. NVL function, it's gonna check if this guy right here is null, then I want to display unknown. I want to show this word unknown if it's not known. Then here, what is 1? I'm just gonna, I don't have to select the column exactly from the database, right? I can count the number of ones. 1 is sort of like a pseudo column, right? It's just gonna do count number of times. I'm just doing the count. I can specify another column here if I know that it's not missing values, or I can put count star. If I want, I can put count star, that's fine, because count star does not ignore missing values. But count, if you specify the specific column name, it's gonna ignore missing values, just know that, null values. So here, this is gonna be different because, first of all, Instead of this blank, I want to show unknown, and then I want it to count. So let's see how it's doing. I want to count, right? Like this. So this is one approach, right? So now I should see 80, right? Another way to do that is to put NVL function here. If it's NVL, I want to treat, if it's null, I want to treat this as unknown. See that? This is another way, and I'm giving you multiple ways because depending on which code you're looking at, you may see it done differently, okay? So you're gonna have this option here. This is just another one, right? It's another way to do it, but this one, if you do it this way, remember, you're gonna get 0 because it's ignoring missing values. So just know the difference between these three statements, right? All right, so now I want to know how many times each hotel is mentioned, right? How do I do it? This is a summary. We are summarizing the data. We're doing a count. Yes, it's a count. So now, what do you want to do? You want the category to be hotel, right? And you want to group by name. See this? So this is a column that I use to summarize the data. Secretly, every uh, non-summary column, right? Every non-group column, not non-aggregate column that appears in select clause need to appear in a group by clause. You're gonna be right most of the time if you just put the same column name here and then in a group by, all right? So how many times each hotel is mentioned? You put the hotel name, you do the count, right? It gives you how many times it's mentioned. And you're gonna do the group by. Remember, if you don't do the group by, you're gonna get the error because, see that? You have a column. If I remove the name and just do count, that's fine. But if I want to display the name, you have to specify that you're grouping by name, right? So that's gonna be returned by this query. Number of times the hotel was mentioned, right? And again, what I'm doing here, the problem is here, if the hotel name is unspecified, then it's gonna again return the blank row like we just saw with a 0. So you have to keep in mind the missing values, right? So now, what does this do? Here, now suppose that I'm gonna change it a little bit. I want to list the hotels that were mentioned more than 50 times. Now remember this, so I have in this specific scenario, I'm filtering the groups. I'm going to specify the condition in a having clause because I'm aggregating data first, right? First thing that I'm doing, I'm calculating how many times the hotel was mentioned. And then from that, I'm selecting only the hotels that were mentioned more than 50 times. So here, this is not the where clause, this is a having clause. Because you're selecting the hotel, you're selecting part of a portion of the summarized data. See what I'm saying? So here, it's gonna go to the having clause, right? So you want to select the hotels that were mentioned more than 50 times in a review. So I'm gonna do run selected. Then you have to validate your work. How do you validate your work in this case? If you see any counts less than 50, it means you need to go back to the drawing board, right? Or in another query, you listed how many times each hotel is mentioned. If you have something in the first query that was returned 1,000 times, just an example, and it's not returned by this query, it means that we need to go back to the drawing board, right? We need to revisit our query. We need to check what's going on. Now, I want to look at this as remember that we have different sentiment values, right? And here, I just want to, this is just how to select how many times you have each sentiment. But here, again, what am I doing? This is another approach. I say here where review rating is not null. In other words, I want to skip the rows that missing the values. Remember in the earlier coursework, you discussed how to handle missing values. I can skip those rows from analysis, or I can assign them to specific category like I did before, unknown, right? But here you want to say where review rating is null, so is not null. So here it's going to select, it's going to do the counts, but it's only going to count rows that have the review rating, not null. So now I'm going to click here. That's going to give me what my result. I skip that row, it doesn't show at all. So that's another way to handle missing data. But keep in mind that if you just omit the missing data, you might be removing other valuable data if you remove the whole row. Maybe sometimes you want to know who did not specify review or why, right? So just define the business problem and go by business problem, all right? So here you want to count, but here you want to include where the sentiment is unknown. This is another way to do that. So let's do this one. And you're grouping by, you can use NVL function inside the grouping. See that? Because that's a column that's non-aggregate, right? It's a non-summary column. I just copied here. I can do it this way. I can do the query this way. I'll show you multiple ways. And what am I doing here? I'm specifying the column alias. All right, so that's how I want to display my column headings, if you will. Now, here, well, let's get to that query slowly. If I want to, right, I can list my hotel name in one column, and I can list the sentiment in the second column, and then I can list in the third column. I can say how many how many perhaps like how many negative reviews are in a hotel, how many positive. So I can have one row, perhaps Hilton Hotel, sentiment unknown, number of records, a Hilton Hotel, slightly negative, number of records, right? I can do multiple groupings, so let's keep this for right now and let's look at something. So here, okay, this is giving you more explanation about the nulls. But if I was going to do this, let's go back to the slides. So in the slides right here, this is one grouping column in this example. I'm just grouping by the name. Here, what am I doing? I'm grouping by the province and the rating. I want to know how many of each ratings I have by the province. So see, I've got two grouping columns. I'm summarizing the data by province and review rating, right? So I'm doing that. Then I'm specifying the table name and I'm specifying the grouping columns. So it's like this, right? I'm listing the province, I'm listing the rating, and I'm listing the count, right? That's what I'm doing here, two conditions. Now what? Let's solve this problem. Let's solve this problem. I want to have my hotel name in the first column. In the next column, I want to list the number of positive reviews for that hotel. In the next column, I want to list the slightly positive. Next column, I want to list the neutral. Next column, I want to show the slightly negatives, and I want to do negative, unknown, and the total, right? So I want to have only one row for each hotel. And I want to have a nice summary like this. How do you do that? There are two steps here. First step, let's look at the preparation step. So I'm going to generate something like this. Let's go up. Let's find this guy here. All right. So this is a preparation step. You're gonna generate, let me run this and show you this is a preparation. You have to break it down step by step. All right, so remember that you can have a calculated column. Sometimes the column is not selected straight from the query. You can have case statements. So what am I doing here? Let's look at this output here. What am I doing here? First of all, I'm doing this, it's a preparation. So I'm listing the hotel name, I'm listing the rating. If the rating is positive, I want to list number 1 in the positive column. And I want to list 0 in the rest of the columns. If it's a slightly positive, I want to list 1 in the slightly positive column and zeros in the rest of the columns. Neutral, I want to put 1 in the neutral column and zeros in the rest of the columns, right? So see this? This is just a preparation. But if I was going to list just the hotel name, how would I list the hotel name, right? And how would I do this? Only 1 line per hotel. First of all, this column will disappear. I only included this for the testing. First, you want to make sure that you got this piece right? Like for example, if review rating is positive and you don't have a 1 in the positive column, you need to go back to the drawing board, something like that. Yeah. First, I wanted to make sure that this piece is correct. Then I'm going to get rid of this column, review rating. And how do I know how many positive reviews are for this hotel, for Ambassadors Inn and Suites? I would need to take the sum, right? So this is like a pseudo column. I create this column with case statement. And then I can just take the sum and group by the hotel names, can't I? I take the sum here to get the number of slightly positive. I take the sum to get the number of neutral reviews, right? Not the count, but the sum, because I'm adding, right? If it's not neutral, it's 0. If it's neutral, it's 1. So to get the number of neutral reviews, I'm gonna take the sum of this column. Unknown, right? And I'll show you. And then the total. But total is gonna be the count, right? So let's take a look at the code for this guy. It's a little bit, it looks complicated, but when you look at it, first of all, what are you doing here? You're selecting name of the hotel, review rating, but what is this? Case statement. Case when review rating is positive, right? Then it's a 1. Otherwise, it's a 0, and this is a column name that you want to show in the output. Then another case statement. You have a case statement for each column. So here, we assume that the values are known, but you had a query above to get those values, right? So you give the column for each of these, and this is what I just showed you, right? And also what I want to do, I want to sort by the hotel name, and I want my sort to be case insensitive. For example, suppose at Hilton, it can be all uppercase, and then in one other row, it can be all lowercase. I want the count to be case insensitive, right? So that's what I want to do here. I mean, sorry, I want the group sorting to be case insensitive, because what it will do if you remove the upper, it's gonna put, I believe it's uppercase first, followed by the lowercase. And what does the nulls last means? It means that if the hotel name is null, I want to list those at the end. All right. So now let's imagine you kind of taking that query and you're building it to it, and you're gonna build it. You're gonna remove the second column, right? Because it's not the columns that the data is being summarized. The data is being summarized by name. You only had the temporarily, right? And you're gonna put the sum function around each of these, right? And you're gonna add the group by clause. You're gonna group by name, right? And for the sorting, you want to display nulls last, but here you just count what are you counting here? count is the total number of rows, right, per hotel. And then for each row, right, you're gonna do the sum. You're gonna show how many you have slightly positive, how many is neutral. So let's run this query, and I'll show you how to do the check here. Remember, you had a query that showed how many times each hotel was mentioned. Oops, trying to select this. Something is going on today. So I want to run this query. Oops, let me see. Sometimes the cursor, there's a cursor here. Okay, let's do this. Sometimes it's just the cursor issue. I want to select this whole thing. Let's see what happens if I just put the, oh, sorry guys. So basically what I want to do right now, I want to run this query. The selection worked before this. Oh, look, I go from the back and I go up, up, up and select it like this. Let's do that. So I'm gonna go run selected. Let's see. All right, it's still executing. So I'll go back here. Let's look at the results. Let's look at the results like this. Okay, so now in each row, see here, I have each hotel listed once. If you see each hotel twice, then you need to go back to the drawing board, right? It means something is wrong with the query. Now here, number of positive, number of negative, number of unknown, and you have a total 40 rows, right? But the important thing is this: when you take the sum, when you take the sum of columns of values in this row, it should be 104, right? If you add up the positive, slightly negative, neutral, if you add up all this column, the sum should be the last total column. And also, remember you did an earlier query on how many times each hotel is mentioned. So the numbers in this total column must match the numbers returned by that query. So the number of times each hotel is mentioned, right? The results, the count returned by that query must match the last column returned by this query. So that's how you would check your work. If they don't, then we need to go back to the drawing board, right? So that's a big query. And this is important. You have an exercise like this for airline sentiment data, then you have a graded exercise in the next assignment, right? And we discussed the problem with nulls, right? Oh, this is an example that we showed in the slides. I have two grouping columns, right? So here, province and review rating. So I have to list both grouping columns in a group by clause of the query, right? Now, here is the next topic, and it's important. So, okay, what is a subquery? Subquery is a query inside the query. The subquery may return one value, it may return a list, or it may return a virtual table, right? Multiple rows, multiple columns. You can put subquery in a select, from, where, or having clause of the main query. For example, if the subquery returns a single value, right, it goes to the where or having clause. Perhaps I want to select the hotel that have above average rating. In a subquery, I would calculate the average rating, right? And then I would put it in a having clause because you would need to, you're filtering out the data after it's aggregated. So that goes to the having. Or if you use like a virtual table, right? It goes to the from clause. And we're gonna look at the examples. But here, this is an example. Suppose that I want to return the provinces that do not have any positive ratings. How do I do it? First of all, I need to have a subquery that returns a list of provinces that have at least one positive rating. So what am I doing here? In the subquery, I want to do select distinct province from hotels, right, where review rating is positive. Then the outer query, I want to select the province that's not in this list returned by the inner query. See that? I want to select the outer query returns the province that's not returned by the inner query. See that? So that's a list, an example of the list. Well, if I wanted to, I could run this separately and then plug it in, but this is too much work, right? So you just put in the subquery and make it return for you, right? So I have more complex examples here. This is more complex example. So here, oh, this one is example we looked at. So I want to list the provinces that don't have any positive. So let's do run selected. And let's see here. I'm just gonna do this. So that's a province, see? It's just a distinct list of provinces that don't have any positive. So I want to know where in the world I have hotels that don't have any positive review. That I have see which regions are bad, right? Where I don't have anything that's positive. Everything negative or slightly positive, things like that, right? And this is the inner query. See that? So in other words, it's equivalent to running this inner query and substituting the result in here, see? But because I don't want to run multiple queries, I want to run a single query, I use a subquery here, see? So that's a reason why. And this one is just count how many positive ratings I have, right? So now what I want to do is here, this is a little bit complex, but you need to break it down. So here, I want to know the average number of positive posts per hotel, right? Then I want to find out which hotels have above average number of positive posts. So you need to break it down. How do you break it down? First of all, right? Well, here I'm calculating the number of positive per hotel. Here I want to know, here is just how you would calculate the number of positive posts per hotel, right? I'm just do run selected and it's just gonna count the number of positive posts per hotel, right? So now if I want to do the average, I want to calculate the average number of positive posts per hotel. How would I do that? So this is the inner query. It returns this table like this. See that this inner query returns this table with name and account. So here I'm going to return the average, but what am I doing here? In a from clause, I am taking the results of that subquery. See, that's a subquery, that's a query above, and I'm nesting it in here. So this subquery is going to return the table like this, with the hotel name and a positive count, right? And then I'm taking this and selecting the average. See that? So you have to do it, you need to do these queries in pieces to make sure each piece works first. So now I'm selecting the average, right? Here, 22. So this is the average number of positive posts per hotel. Now, I want to know which hotels have more than 22 average, more than 22 positive reviews. How do I do it? Oh, well, you may think this. You may think, let's do it like this. Let's count the number. Let's list the name. Let's count. Let's do the count. How many I have how many ratings do I have, right? And then let's plug it in. Let's say having that count is greater than 22. Wait a minute. Today it's 22. Tomorrow it could be more than 22, right? As the data grows. So how do we do it dynamically? How do we write the code to do that? We take this query here that returns the average, right? This query here returns the average number of positive posts. I take that and I plug it into my having clause. See that? I plug it into my condition in a having clause. I have two nested subqueries in the having clause. See that? So remember, the first subquery inside, it's gonna do the count. It's gonna count. It returns the hotel and the number of positive posts for that hotel. Then we take in the average, right? And then we display in the hotels that are above average. That's what it's doing, right? So that's an example of the subquery. Why am I going through this? Because in your assignment 3, you will need to write at least one query, one meaningful query with a subquery. All right, that's why I'm going through this, to help you out. So here I'm just breaking it down for you, how you would look at this, right? You need to break down piece by piece, right? And it will help you a lot, right? If you break it down. For the R Studio, at some point, there were 3 environments. If at any time, if you see 3, you want to select the one with the 2 CPUs. Just make sure that select the environment that consumes only 1 capacity unit per hour. You're given the R code with multiple examples. So what you're gonna do in there? You're gonna go to the same environment that you used for last assignment, right? Then you may reuse the project that you created, or you may create brand new project. I'll leave it up to you, but you will need to upload the data to that project, and then you're given a code to read the data in R. You're gonna check the number of rows that you've read, and you're gonna run the analysis that you're given, right? You're given the code. And also remember this, in R Studio, this is R Studio in the cloud. This is not your computer, right? In another class, in an earlier course, you could do the update. You can install the packages that you wanted. Not the case here. You need to check. Well, you do install the packages that mentioned in the tutorials that do not exist in there. Once in a while, our studio gets re-imaged, so please be prepared for this. Whatever packages are part of it today might be different tomorrow. They may run an update in the cloud. So please prepare yourself for these things. The sooner you get the assignment done, the less likely you're affected by this. But the thing is here, this is a disk usage. If you like to save a bunch of different visualizations, well, you may want to take screenshots and then delete, because each visualization that you have saved in your workspace, it takes what? Space, right? And then if you remember, if you go to environment window in the R Studio, you have 2 views. The reason I like the grid view is because it shows me how much space each object takes. Like, for example, when you start working with text, the matrix, right? The document term matrix, those are huge, because you're analyzing here how many times the term appears in each post, things like this. So these matrices are big. When you don't need this matrix anymore, you're gonna do what? You're gonna remove it. Remember rm command to remove programmatically, or you go to this window, environment window, and you're going to select the object that you want to remove, and you're gonna click on the broom, right? That's one way to use the window, but I like it to do it in the code, but that's me. Well, the reason why, because you're not always going to have this nice interface. You need to know both ways, right? So you want to reduce the disk space utilization. You want to remove the objects that you no longer need, right? Delete the plots that you no longer need. Delete, what you no longer need, you need to remove. You load only packages that you use in memory. Do not load everything, because your session is gonna terminate. It's gonna run out of memory. I have seen those errors. Students have been getting these errors, trust me. So please watch out for that. Oh, this is just showing you what's happening is that when your RStudio runs, the consumption hours going up, 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 up. They're not going down, they're going up. Remember that? When you use the environment for last assignments, if you looked at the capacity hours, there were two numbers. The numbers that you've used, they go up, 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 up. See? Important, that's a quiz question. The numbers, that number is going up, up. That question is about the numbers that you see on the environments page. This is not the number on how many capacity hours the service consumes per hour. This is a question about what's happening in actual environment. Your consumption is going up. Once you exceed that number of hours, you might still be able to run the current session, but you won't be able to launch RStudio again until next month. If you're working, you might still be able to continue. But once the session ends, you will not be able to start the new session. Once you run out of capacity hours, you won't be able to start until November. All right? So please pay undivided attention to these hours. Also, I need to double check if this is still the case. If you forgot to stop, I believe it may time out after 2 hours, but I need to check. They keep on changing this, all right? A long time ago, there used to be 25 hours. Now it's 10. Well, we have no control over it because people abuse the environment and they want to make sure this is no longer the case, right? And remember that environments, they can be stopped in multiple ways. You can just go to the environment setting from the main menu, or you can go to environment within the project. But you might be thinking, I'm going to create another project to get another 10 hours. No, it goes the total number of hours by months. All right? Total number of hours in a month. So at the end of the month, the hours go back to 10. But for the assignment 4, you don't need to use capacity hours. All right, so this assignment, this tutorial assignment and assignment 3, this assignment is a prerequisite for assignment 3. So assignment 3 is not available until you submit this sentiment analysis tutorial assignment, all right? This is the reason, because some student may look at this, oh, wait a minute, assignment 3 is worth more point, let's do that first, it's more important. No, it's not going to work this way, because if you did not create the service, if you don't know how to load data, you won't be able to do assignment 3. The assignment 3 instructions are maybe like only a couple of pages. We're not going to repeat the instructions to upload the file. It's just going to say upload the file. The only instructions that you will have is the columns that you need to adjust. When you load the data for the assignment 3, you'll need to adjust the column width. So this is in the instructions, but it's not going to say click on this button to do this. You need to know the steps. You need to know how the service was added, right? You need to know how to run the SQL code. You need to know how to launch the RStudio. So you run this tutorial to learn how, and you look at the given example, make sure you understand the methods. But when you do it for assignment 3, please choose no more than 3 methods and go in depth, right? Keep in mind that you're given just an example. For instance, if you're running the association rules, please do use help. Remember, you put a question mark and the command name, it's going to give you a nice help page. Please look at the help page for the method and please check which parameters the method takes. because if you run it with defaults, you're only gonna get 2 records. So how can we fix it? You will need to tweak the parameters. Look at parameters, look at the output, right? Look at the metrics for each rule, and what do they tell about the rules? See, you want to look in more depth. Or if you're doing a network of terms, you want to identify the subsets of terms, right? Which terms do you think appear together, etc. You want to do more, right? And this is just some error. Oh no, that's not an error. This is an environment page. Sorry. So this is an environment page. You're gonna go to environments, right? You want to make sure that no current environments are running at the moment before you log out. Do yourself a favor. Make sure that you don't have any environments running. If something is running, you need to stop it. If you are unable to stop it from this page, go to the project. It usually tells you the project where it's running in and try to stop it in that project. But if something is running, it's going to consume the capacity hours. And I would recommend doing the work at the time when you're least likely to be disrupted, because suppose that friend calls you on the phone and during the conversation, the environment keeps running and consuming the capacity hours. Because see, if you use that environment wisely, you're not going to be running the code for 10 hours, right? So just no, because see that for the tutorial you're given the code, right? But for the assignment 3, you need to write the code for the data that you're working with. If you just plug in the code, you're not gonna get good result. You need to, you choose 2 or 3 methods. You don't need to choose all methods that you're given an example, right? And you make sure that you go more in depth. No plug it thing in. No, that's not gonna work. You're not gonna get the results that you're interested in because you need to tweak the method parameters. See what I'm saying? So it's not gonna work this way. This is not just this is not when you can take the code verbatim and just plug the data in. No, because your data is different, right? So please watch out and do more in depth. Look at the input parameters. And for example, for the association rules, you may want to look at what metrics are returned for each rule, right? Perhaps you want to look at the number of you may want to look at the subset of specific rules, etc. So just look, review if you use that method. This is just an example for the network of terms. I'm looking here at the subsets, right? So what are the maximum subsets of terms with positive sentiment? What are they, right? Which words could appear together? See? So it's just a subset. And you're given the script, the whole code. But I just wanted to say, if you're doing a network of terms, you want to analyze something like this, see? You want to do beautiful visualization like this and analyze what it means, what it tells you. Don't just put the output, you want to explain it to the best knowledge, right? And this is a little bit about the troubleshooting. So if I showed you if the credentials page is missing, it means you're looking at the cloud pack instead of looking at the IBM cloud. You remember the differences, right? The cloud pack is a sub-platform. It doesn't have the administrative things, such as adding credentials. You need to go to IBM cloud, right? So if you see, all right, in R, remember that the function with the same name may appear in the same package. For example, a rules package for association rules have a function called inspect, and that function returns the rules. On the other hand, you also have inspect function when you're working with a text, right? So how does it know if you have both packages in memory? How does R know which function to call? So what you need to do is, it's a solution. You need to qualify the function name with the package name. So here, I want to call inspect function from a rules package. What am I doing here? I put a rules, column. See this? This is how you qualify the function name with the package name, and here the function. And I want to show the first 15 rules. Be careful here too, because in my example, I had more than 15 rules, right? In your example, if you have only 2 rules, this is going to throw error. Why? Because you only have 2 rules. How can you take 15 rules from the subset if you have only 2, right? So, well, you need to go back to the drawing board. Why you have only 2? Why can't you have more rules? You need to tweak some parameters, right? And this is your homework. I'll leave it for your homework. You go to R, type question mark, and then type a rules. It's going to give you a nice help page on the rules. And also, there is a CRAN library with the packages. We can read description from there, right? So just review the rules from earlier coursework. If you're using this method, if you're using clustering, please review the clustering, okay? So that's it. Oh, another one is this. In your query, see this example here, my query is throwing error. Why my query is throwing an error? Because the database column is spelled with underscore ID, and in the query, I'm missing the underscore, right? So if you're getting an error, please make sure that the column names are correct. Check, take screenshot or something like that. Take screenshot of the column names, put it next to you. Then you know how to spell the correctly. Right? See, the tweet underscore ID is not the same as tweet ID without the underscore. So you have to fix this, right? Make sure you're querying the correct table. Check the spelling of the column name. Check the spelling of the table name. All right? You want to pay attention to that. This is just showing you another error. It's because the table name is incorrect. See, the underscore is missing. Well, and thing is that please save the copy of all code on your PC. Right? You're gonna save the code in RStudio, but what happens if you run out of hours? You run out of capacity hours, but you want to submit the work that you have at least, right? In order to access the code that you saved in RStudio, you need to launch the RStudio, but you cannot launch the RStudio if you have no capacity hours left. So what can we do? After each session, please do save the copy of the R code on your PC, right? Save it in RStudio, but also save it in your PC, because if you run out of capacity hours, you will not be able to access that code in RStudio until next month, right? But you want to turn in what you have. Maybe you ran out of time and you could not do one method. You only got one method. But you want to get credit for that method, right? You might not get full credit for the R part, but it's better than nothing, right? So you want to turn in what you have, but you won't be able to access it if you run out of capacity hours. So you want to save the R on your PC. For SQL, if something goes wrong with a node, you won't be able to access your SQL code. Once in a while, the DB2 instance doesn't restart. Something wrong on their end with that specific node. But when you create another instance of that service, it will work. Sometimes it's like this. Sometimes the node is down. If the node is down and it's a time to turn in the SQL code, if you did not save the copy on your PC, you cannot submit it, right? So please save everything on your PC, okay? You want to be safe. And please follow instructions and keep in mind that the best way to get something done is to begin. You need to begin and then you get it done. If you don't start, and here are some useful R commands. You probably know this already, right? But I did throw it in here. All right, questions for me? Anything you want to ask me about this assignment? Any concerns? I know it was over an hour today, but I hope it was time well spent. You may need to rewatch certain pieces of SQL section. Any questions, guys? Please ask. Please do ask questions. And what's gonna happen? You're gonna get this recording, you're gonna get slides, you're gonna get SQL code, and you're gonna get the hotel data. Sounds good? Any questions? Going once, twice, thrice? No questions? All good? All right, then we call it a night. You can unmute yourself if you want. No? All right, then we call it. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you so much for the session.
Oh, most welcome, most welcome. Anything you want to add?
No, all good. You did so good job.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we're gonna have the recording and this file, right? The slides and the hotel data and the SQL. All right. Thank you, everyone. And we're gonna have another session for assignment 4. All right. See you later.